Hey, 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 hey. Hey.
Tenderness and gentleness and open-heartedness, that as self-care, that as self-stewardship. The outer work of social justice and equity follow from the development of the inner work.
In the morning.
You're listening to The Seed, Conversations for Radical Hope, a Pendle Hill podcast where Quakers and other seekers come together to explore visions of the world that is growing up through the cracks of our broken systems. I'm your host, Dwight Dunstan. This season, we're exploring what spiritual alignment means in this moment of escalating social and political upheaval and violence. How do we cultivate discernment to stay the course and stay connected to our leadings? How are we being called to transform ourselves and our communities to break down systems of oppression and embody new ways of being? Our guest today is Valerie Brown. Valerie is an author, Buddhist-Quaker Dharma teacher, facilitator, and executive coach specializing in leadership development and mindfulness practices with a focus on diversity, social equity, and inclusion. A former lawyer and lobbyist, Valerie transformed her high-pressure 20-year career into serving leaders and nonprofits to create trustworthy, authentic, compassionate, and connected workspaces. Her most recent book is Healing Our Way Home, Black Buddhist Teachings on Ancestors, Joy, and Liberation with Marisela Gomez and Kaira Lingo. Welcome, Valerie Brown, to The Seed, Conversations for Radical Hope. I'm excited about what will unfold in our time together here. Always when we're in space, spirit moves. So just want to start out by saying thank you for joining us.
You're so welcome. It's a delight to be here.
The place that we love to start with our guests, invite you into the question of just landing here and just sharing with us. What's it like being Valerie Brown today? What's it like being you?
Wow. Thank you. That's a really powerful question for me. At Meeting for Worship today online at Pendle Hill, as I was preparing before and after, I started kind of thinking back, a kind of Rolodex of my mind, thinking back over the years, and most immediately, and in full transparency, I have been through the last 4 or 5 years, certainly a period of a lot of grief, a lot of loss. I'm very aware that I'm not the only one, that we've been through a pandemic and that many, many people have experienced grief and continue to this day as I think about the tragedies that are going on right this moment and the people who are suffering. I'm aware that my grief and the loss and the deaths that I've experienced connect me with many other people. And on a personal level, all of this grief really rearranged me and rearranged my way of thinking. You know, my training, my background from years ago was as a lawyer and a lobbyist. And so I had very much of this type A, get it done mindset. And I brought that mindset into my life and my work, quite unyielding, quite determined. A lot of that was kind of social conditioning too. And I brought that get it done attitude into the grief. Like, people are depending on you, buckle up. Of course, grief is not like that. One of the things that I have been learning is yielding to the movement of grief, allowing it to rearrange me in a way that I don't know and can't know, and really being with the soul nature of it, the mystery of it. There's really no words. I've written about it in my book, Hope Leans Forward, but I feel like it had its way with me, and I'm emerging from that into something else that's yet to be defined.
And just breathing that in, noticing even as you began to talk about your own process and relationship to your grief, both myself get emotional, get tearful, and also this thread of connection, this tendon begin to strengthen between us. I often think about how Ross Gay talks about grief as maybe that's the thing that both that joy comes from being able to touch into that grief, and also maybe that's the thing that really connects us to one another. This word rearranging that you used, I'm curious how you've oriented to, or maybe lessons that have come to you from the need to rearrange due to the grief that you've experienced, or due to feeling into the collective grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important question, and one that I've been wrestling with as I went through some of my processes with the death of my brothers, the end of a marriage, and so forth. I really wanted to hold on. Like, can't you just hold on? Can't this just be? At some point, I came to what Kubler-Ross and many others talk about, the acceptance of this is the way it is. This is it. And so the trying to rearrange the situation to make it work. Actually, we're talking about control, to be perfectly honest and crass. That control was not going to work. What I realized was that what was needed was actually the opposite of that in some ways, which was yielding and maybe even a surrender. In the acceptance, the yielding, the surrender, there was a rearranging in my own body and in my mind and my heart, a kind of tenderness and gentleness. I rose organically. I didn't set out for that. I think it happened over time in its own way, that it was not anticipated. I didn't grow up with a lot of tenderness and gentleness and stuff like that. I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn and lived there a good portion of my life, hard as nails, type A lawyer. So this way of being was a becoming. None of this has a timeline on it. And one of the things that I've realized, not just with grief, but interestingly enough, with the nature of insight, is that the wanting to have this figured out. One of the things that I offer a lot to the Quaker community and other communities, particularly as a Dharma teacher in the Plum Village tradition, is, people understandably want to figure stuff out. They want insight. Tell me how this is supposed to work. And I can understand that. Yet feels like it's part of a whole spiritual consumerism that we absorb, a kind of acquisitional nature to it, kind of commodification of being a spiritual person. I need to get insight, get this and do this right. And I had this huge epiphany last year because a friend of mine sent me a poem attributed to Hafiz. Maybe it was Rumi. This poem blew me away because the poem said something like, what if what you want, and fill in the blank with what you want, more solidity, more clarity, more insight. What if what you want actually wants you, has been looking for you? What if that were the case? And that for me felt radical. Radical and obvious at the same time. Because for myself and so many people that I encounter, we're searching and looking. If I just do this and I get this next thing and I'm da-da-da-da, I will be in that place. And what if whatever it is we actually wants us back? As a matter of fact, been knocking on our door and waiting, arms open, and that we already have it. I've been really sitting with that. What that has resulted in is in a kind of yielding to the grief, to the rearrangement of all of this, to the not knowing.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in all of what you're sharing. I hear it being a journey for you to come to the understandings, right? It wasn't something that happened overnight. As you shared, it's not on a timeline, but it's continuing to unfold. And I'm curious about the lessons of yielding, of surrender that you perhaps learned in community or the ecosystems that you're a part of. Even this friend sending you a poem that was transformational, that was illuminating, that experience coming from outside you, coming from a member of the community, helping you in your journey.
So there's two things that come to mind. One is immediate and the other is kind of lifelong. So the first immediate thing really came yesterday.
Fresh.
On Zoom all day with a group of 20 Black federal national public administrators. These are amazing people that do public service work. So they work with large and small communities around the United States, serving low-income people, often who are unhoused, who have food insecurity. And so I was working with the administrators, and understandably, these people are on burnout because of the weight that they are carrying. So our entire day yesterday was on mindful leadership. Every one of these high-achieving leaders were extremely hard on themselves. They felt they were not doing enough and needed to do more. And this, of course, can be driven by the enormous urgency and the need that's out there. And we spent most of the day, a good part of the day, talking about our ancestry. And what was so interesting was how hearing so many people talk about the sense of urgency that they inherited from their ancestors to do better, to do good. And so this kind of intergenerational urgency that becomes a real strong inner critic that is really the opposite of yielding. It is driving. That combined with the grind culture that we live in today that I was very much a part of, it's toxic stew. As I look out the window and I see the snow falling gently, that's like a wake-up call. That is a way to remember how to yield. That is specific instruction for my body and my mind, how to be in the world. I think if we're attentive, we can unlearn some of this that's happened to us. So that's one immediate thing that I learned yesterday about how we get caught up in this unyielding pursuit. The whole day yesterday was spent unlearning that, like how to breathe, how to eat, how to walk, how to talk, without the sense of, I got to get something and get somewhere. And then, of course, the other way that I have found to be so powerful, many people know that I offer a pilgrimage on El Camino de Santiago in Spain. And I've been offering this for many years. And so it's really becoming a pilgrim's mind and a pilgrim's heart. How to reclaim this lost art of pilgrimage. And by that, I mean how to be with what we don't know. We don't know what's around the corner. How to be with the uncertainty and sometimes volatility of the weather, of other people. That by its nature is going to call on us to yield. By its nature, it's going to call on us to maybe go inward and notice, pay attention to what's happening. The nature of being a pilgrim is the nature of uncertainty and ambiguity and wonder. To cultivate a kind of wonder.
I just feel myself buzzing at what you shared. And I mean, the word wonder, my eyes and my heart automatically just get bigger. As a young person, it's readily accessible to think about some moments of wonder that I've had. And as an adult artist, that's been a practice of mine to cultivate that spontaneity and wonder in different creative experiences. and stepping into that uncertainty and ambiguity. I want to bring this thread, you've mentioned it, but I want to bring it to the forefront of our conversation, the connection between Buddhism and Quakerism. And you've written on this, and I'm just curious, as you look out into the world today and think about what you're being called to be faithful to in your life in this time, curious how Buddhism and Quakerism are speaking to you.
I see a deep interconnection between Buddhism and Quakerism. One of the things that I've been incredibly grateful for in being a Buddhist, having studied with Thich Nhat Hanh and the community, and now being a Dharma teacher, is the importance of community. You know, one of the things Thich Nhat Hanh or Thai has said over and over to us is the next Buddha to come will be the Sangha. And how incredibly important it is that as one person, we can only do but so much, but as a community, we can make so many changes. That is one major thing that I've really tried to embody in my life is community. Speaking of community, of course, Pendle Hill as a community. As I said, I started my day today online with community. And it's really a reclamation of community. It calls on us, and for many of us, to move outside of our comfort zone, to find community that is grounded. The other thing that is really important from both the Quaker and the Buddhist perspective is the importance of the inner work as self-care. We're fed a lot about self-care. Much of this is, to me, fake. I have nothing against a bubble bath and a mani-pedi. I think that's all super. But that's not the same as inner work as self-care. By that I mean being in right relationship with ourselves. One of the things that I so admire about my time with Parker Palmer and studying with him and mentoring with him is his emphasis on the development of the inner life. Our sense of solidity and clarity and compassion and groundedness and kindness, not perfection, and really prioritizing, really developing these inner qualities of tenderness and gentleness and open-heartedness. That as self-care, that as self-stewardship, that as self-love. And then the outer work of social justice and equity follow from the development of the inner work. For us as Quakers, this is very, very important. And of course, Thich Nhat Hanh has often talked about social engagement and engaged Buddhism. That we don't just sit in a cave in the Himalayas meditating, and not that there is anything wrong with that, but that we bring out, we live out. Our life is our message. As Quakers, we say, let our life speak. The way we speak, the way we walk. Merton, one of the greatest compliments, one of the greatest things that Thomas Merton said of Thich Nhat Hanh was that he could tell by the way that Thich Nhat Hanh opened the door that he was a spiritual person.
This idea of the Sangha and this idea of the meeting house. And there's so many conversations in Quaker spaces that are around the evolution of Quakerism. What are the pieces of Quakerism that are at the core, foundational? What are some pieces that we may need to transform and evolve in order to meet the times, to respond to the time? From my limited knowledge, I know that in engaged Buddhism, there have been ways that it has evolved to be responsive to the times in particular ways. Thinking about the impacts of racism and other forms of oppression need to be interrogated and uprooted to make spaces more inclusive. Religion, spiritualities have gone through different kinds of transformations that respond to what's going on in the wider, specifically in America, American culture, right? There's been reckonings across different justice movements and intertwined justice movements too. As you see Quakerism continue to evolve and grow, any parts of Quakerism that you feel like are at a important nexus of transformation, or that you're excited about the continual revelation around a specific aspect of Quakerism, Quaker faith?
I wrote down the words, rise up. That's the Brooklyn in me coming out.
Mm-hmm. Come on now. Bring it on. It's here. It's here.
All right. Yeah, rise up. You know, Sam Cooke, change gonna come. There's a rising up that sorely is needed. The world is transforming around us. And the question is whether we as Quakers will also be transformed. How will we transform? Because it's already happening around us. We know the demographics. We know the country, the United States, is more brown, more black. We know that the socioeconomic distribution, the disparities, that this is becoming wider and wider. We need to consider particularly meeting houses as places of not only silent worship, but action to address some of these disparities that exist. And I know that there are many meetings that do this and do this very, very well. And yet there are many meetings that are holding on to a very individualistic way of looking and experiencing the movement of God in our lives. We're being surrounded by the forces of change as we head into an election in the United States where the stakes are incredibly high. We as a Quaker community really need to rise up, really consider who are we, what are we. Quakers know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And we can do this. We can speak truth. We can do this. Mm. I think that is one of the things that we're being called on to do. And one of the core things about Quakerism, and one of the things that people invariably say when I mention anything about being a Quaker, is how much respect and admiration people have for the sense of social equity that Quakers have historically represented. This is a very important and a turning point that we have as Quakers and that we really need to reclaim.
And we're nearing the end of our time together, so I would love to, as we move to close, make space for any last things you want to share, practices that you'd like to offer our listeners as they feel into what rising up means for them or their community.
Thank you for that. First and foremost, and something that I'm really on a journey right now on, is really reconnecting with myself and accepting myself as I actually am, good, bad, in between, as a practice. So the practice I would offer is the practice that Thich Nhat Hanh has taught us over many years as his students, and that is the 4 mantras. These mantras are a way of developing self-stewardship, self-love, self-advocacy, and in a very deep way. And so this is a practice. It's not like mindlessly saying, I love you to yourself and not believing it, but really on a cellular level, really absorbing this. And so he often says, begin by placing maybe your hand on your heart. There's a lot of research that says that just that activates parasympathetic response in the body. The first of the 4 mantras is powerful for me. The mantra is, darling, I am there for you. And really breathing into those words, darling, I'm there for you. That has been incredibly healing for me, to recognize that I can provide for myself healing and I can offer that to myself. I can receive that and then share that with other people. It's an antidote in many ways to that inner critic that's so harsh. It's the foundation for doing good in the world. It comes from that inner sense of right relationship with ourselves. I would offer that mantra, darling, I'm there for you.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for bringing that mantra forward. Thank you to Thich Nhat Hanh for bringing that to you, and just so much gratitude for our conversation today. I feel equal part so settled and rested and also ignited. I can't thank you enough for just all that you brought to our time together today. So just thank you, thank you, thank you.
So grateful to you, to the community, and thank you for creating and supporting this platform.
An honor, an honor.
Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. In the morning.
The Seed is a project of Pendle Hill, a Quaker center open to all for spirit-led learning, retreat, and community. We're located in Wallingford, Pennsylvania, on the traditional territory of the Lenni-Lenape people. Many of our guests are teachers, leaders, and speakers at Pendle Hill, and we host retreats, workshops, and lectures all year round. For a full list of these upcoming education opportunities, visit pendlehill.org/learn. To learn more about Valerie's work, visit her website at valeriebrown.us. This episode was produced and edited by Anna Hill, with consulting from Peterson Toscano. Our theme music is the I Rise Project by Reverend Retta Morgan and Bennett Kuhn, produced by Astronautical Records. This project was made possible by the generous support of the Thomas H. and Mary Williams Shoemaker Fund. You can stay in touch by following us at Pendle Hill Seed on all social media platforms, or by emailing podcast@pendlehill.org. If you're finding these conversations meaningful, you can support our work financially by heading over to pendlehill.org/donate. And please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. These seeds could not be planted without you.